Hello and welcome to the 2025 February DAC training on high school. My name is Kristen Roseberry. I'm a program consultant in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. This training is one in a series to prepare DACs and BACs for the upcoming spring state test administration. Today we will cover ACT administration information, ACT resources, accountability, student data review and rosters, and post-secondary readiness, as well as provide you with some February DAC question and answer sessions and contact information. Let's talk about the ACT administration information. The initial test window begins on March the 11th and runs through March the 21st. You can use any of the 9 test days during that time, during the initial test window, to begin your testing and complete any makeup tests. The makeup test window begins on March the 25th and runs through April the 4th. Again, it has 9 test days, and you're welcome to use any of those 9 test days. Please note, ACT and the Office of Assessment and Accountability have worked to secure an emergency test window 3. OAA will work with those districts should a statewide emergency arise. KDE expects that test window 1 will serve as the initial testing window, while test window 2 is the makeup window. For effective test administration, schools will establish test sessions for window 1 from February 10th to March 21st and create test sessions for window 2 from March 19th to April the 4th. You have a couple of setup options. Option 1, you can test in window 1 and window 2 and use all 18 test days. Option 2, you do all of your testing in the initial test window 1 using only those 9 test days. The qualified exception to the deadline for test window 1 is January 27th through March the 7th, and for test window 2, March 11th through the 14th. What qualifies a student for this exception? A student that might be new to your school, they changed grade level, they might have a new diagnosis, they're newly identified as an English language learner and need support, or there's a sudden onset of a medical condition. Please note, this is not an extension to your request deadline, but for the events that occur after the deadline. For the spring 2025 ACT State Administration, ACT is offering staggered start times known as the late start policy. This option will be available for paper testing, online testing, and accommodation testing. Districts may offer multiple test sessions within a day, so long as the rules about late start time, which are outlined in ACT's administration manual, are followed. The staggered sessions should be structured to avoid overlapping breaks, and the last session must start by 10:30 a.m. In addition, if a staggered start time is used, testing staff must ensure that examinees from different rooms do not have the ability to interact with each other during any breaks. If any school utilizes a staggered start time, an irregularity report must be completed. Here is an example of a staggered start time testing schedule. The MyACT sessions cannot be completed on the day of testing. Therefore, the non-test session will have to be scheduled prior to testing day. This policy is limited to multiple overlapping sessions only. For example, Group A could not start and finish prior to Group D starting. Most importantly, please ensure that student groups do not have the opportunity to mingle or pass in the hall during any staggered testing schedule. These are some examples of the staggered times that could be utilized. However, a smaller school with only 2 groups could, for example, utilize Group B and D for a testing schedule. Please note the times will vary based on reading of script and extended time for accommodated students. With each ACT administration, all Kentucky DACs are responsible for recording students in their districts who are under 18 years of age and do not have parental consent to opt into ACT's EOS or Select Score recipients. This will be done by choosing a response to a state use question in Pearson Access Next. Parental consent must be obtained for each administration and does not transfer over from any administration, including this past spring or more recent fall administration. The non-test activity for examinees is completed on the MyACT website, regardless of the test mode, paper or online. Students with consent can complete the non-test activity from their homes. However, it is the expectation of KDE that at least one support session be held for students with consent prior to testing. If unforeseen circumstances prevent a student from completing the non-test activity before testing, it can be completed on an emergency basis only in the 2 days after testing. The day of testing should never be utilized for a MyACT support session. Separately, testing staff will need to hold a support session for students without consent for the non-test instructions. Students without consent should be guided through the non-test portion of the test at school. If a student guides all students through the non-test portion of the test, KDE recommends that students under the age of 18 without consent complete the non-test portion of the exam at a different time or location than students who have consent. Separating these two groups of students will allow test administrators to confirm that students are not completing the specific sections of the non-test activity, which impacts EOS opt-in and score reports provided to third parties. Students without consent should be instructed to skip questions related to the following topics: opting into ACT EOS and requesting score reports be sent to colleges or scholarship agencies. A few reminders regarding parental consent for EOS and score recipients. Regardless of parental consent for a student to opt into EOS, the student is still required to test. Do your best to collect parental consent for each student. Consent can be electronic or written, but if collected electronically, please consult with your district administrators to ensure you are following any local board policies regarding collecting consent electronically. It is the expectation that schools hold two separate support sessions for students with consent and students without consent. Testing staff will complete the state use question and PAN for students who do not have consent. This slide that you will see has a yellow star in it because this information is new for this testing cycle. Schools will no longer return scratch paper, translated test directions, used and unused student authorization tickets, and the majority of the test administration forms. For those documents, please arrange for secure destruction in accordance with ACT's recommended retention guidelines highlighted in the online administration manual. There is still one administration form that needs to be returned to ACT, which is the seating diagram. This form will need to be returned via an electronic file upload in PAN using the supports request function. All secure and non-secure materials will be shipped together regardless of the testing window. Also, ACT will no longer be sending pre-ID barcode labels for students registered to test online. Now let's discuss some ACT resources. The ACT schedule of events provides deadlines for each testing window and outlines the various tasks that need to be completed during each administration cycle. Tasks will vary based on which type of administration is being managed, online or accommodated paper. The KDE ACT College Admissions Exam Guidance and FAQ for spring 2025 is available. It is an important resource that is updated with each administration and should be downloaded for reference. Now we're going to talk about accountability, SDRR, and post-secondary readiness. ACT is one option for students to demonstrate academic readiness in the post-secondary readiness indicator. Schools may use scores from any ACT administration, national or state, to demonstrate academic readiness in the post-secondary readiness indicator. KRS 158.6455 requires that post-secondary readiness for each high school student be measured by one benchmark. Therefore, a student meeting or exceeding college readiness benchmark score on the college admissions exam or a college placement exam approved by the Council on Post-Secondary Education would have met the indicator. The Office of Assessment and Accountability will accept the AccuPlacer and EdReady assessments for the post-secondary readiness indicator. However, as a reminder, OAA only receives scores from the ACT and Coyote exams. If a student uses the SAT, GED, college readiness, AccuPlacer, EdReady, or the ALEX exam, the school will need to ensure OAA receives an official score report from the assessment. When students receive the ACT score reports, they will contain ACT benchmarks. For accountability purposes, KDE will use the benchmarks established by the Council on Post-Secondary Education. For example, if a student receives a 21 in reading, the student did not meet the benchmarks for ACT. However, the student did meet the KDE accountability benchmark set by the Council on Post-Secondary Education. All students must participate in state-required testing. The exception is students who have scored a 36 on a previous ACT exam. Given that ACT is one of the many assessments students can use to demonstrate post-secondary readiness, OAA has removed the task of collecting non-participation for ACT rosters and SDRR. ACT will continue to be included in SDRR as part of the post-secondary readiness indicator in grade 12 or upon graduation in spring rosters and fall data review. Please note, any student in the district or in the school level that does not test, please keep documentation at your local level. The documentation could be requested during monitoring visits. Just to reiterate, it is the expectation that all juniors and early graduate students test. As a reminder, early graduate students only test once. Next, you will see some February DAC question and answer session information and contact information. We will have 3 question and answer sessions, February the 3rd in Frankfort, that's in person only, February 11th in Ashland, that is hybrid, in person and online, and our last hybrid session will be February 19th in Eddyville. Please note, if weather or other circumstances impact the in-person session, the question and answer session will be held online only. This is the schedule we will follow at our question and answer sessions. Please note the February DAC question and answer sessions will follow the same topics and time frame at each location. The agenda and times on the slide will be followed. However, once an agenda item has no additional questions, staff will move on to the next topic. Participants should plan to attend for the entire meeting. Here is a list of the February DAC trainings that we have available. Please note, since the live question and answer sessions will not include full presentations of content already covered in the video recordings, DACs and BACs should be prepared for the question and answer sessions. Before attending the question and answer sessions, DACs and BACs can be prepared by watching all or pertinent training videos on the administration of spring 2025 assessments. This concludes the February DAC training on high school. Thank you for your time.